Prophecy. It never ceases to amaze me. I can read prophecies of the Bible, and the Bible has many, many prophecies about the last times. And it's a subject that's very dear to my heart. So, Jerusalem, a city of conflict and a city of hope. Jerusalem is really at the centre of the three main religions of the world today: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Paul says in the New Testament, Jerusalem is the mother of us all. So you can see the Bible's emphasis is how important Jerusalem is and the role it plays in all of our lives if we understand God and his purpose. And throughout history, the ownership of Jerusalem has been surrounded with controversy. It's been the source of conflicts that have rolled on throughout the centuries. But it's also a city of hope and joy, and hopefully we'll come to that at the end of our session. But this term, controversy, is a Bible term actually, and it's picked up in Isaiah 34 verse 8. If you have a Bible, by all means follow along, maybe on your phone or a hard copy. But the controversy of Zion is an interesting term that the Bible uses to describe Jerusalem, because Zion is an interchangeable word with Jerusalem, to describe the circumstances at the end time. It's interesting, this is what I love about the Bible, is looking at the term, there's a lot of stuff implied in just a little phrase like that. Firstly, the controversy of Zion. Zion is a Jewish term that's used. In fact, the Jews, as they migrated back to the Promised Land during the last century and before, called themselves Zionists. They picked up this biblical term. So implicit in this statement of the Bible is the Jewish people. The controversy will centre around them. This is what the Bible tells us. And of course, Zion being the capital city of Israel or the Promised Land, the land itself is also embroiled in the controversy. This is what's quite amazing about it. Just a simple little phrase, the controversy of Zion, we have so much weight. This is the Promised Land. So that brings us, and this is just a quick digression down to some ancient history, to Abraham. This controversy, ironically, didn't just commence in these last times. It goes right back to the beginning, into the very family of Abraham himself. Abraham was a very special man in God's eyes. He was invited by God by directive to go to the Promised Land, and that God would show him this. And ultimately, when he arrived, it says, the Lord said to Abraham, or Abram, all the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. And eventually, when Abraham had children, he had two sons to start with, the friction started between those two boys right back then, so much so that it divided his family. And one of the sons had to be expelled from the house. And the argument, coincidentally, was over who was the firstborn and who has the right of inheritance. That's what the argument was really all about. So this term, it's found in Isaiah 34 verse 8. And the context of it is really interesting. It's a very powerful chapter if you have the time to read it all. We'll just grab a little bit, but we're sort of zooming out now. We've picked up that phrase. Now we're looking at the verse for its context. It says there, for it is the day of the Lord's vengeance and the year of recompenses, notice plural, for the controversy of Zion. So the context of this little phrase shows us that this is actually the trigger of God's direct intervention. The day of the Lord, it's called. And he's not just going to say, righto, settle down now, let's just get on and be friends. It's the day of vengeance. There are hot issues that are associated with Zion, hence the controversy. And it's this city that generates so much frustration, so much anger, so much pain and bloodshed. And the Bible, amazingly, foresaw all of this as the setting of the last days where we are. And that's the title of our advertising. What on earth is happening here? Well, the Bible tells us. It's interesting. This is just an overlay. Going back to that, we can see there is the Western Wailing Wall, the remnant of the ancient temple that Solomon built and was embellished by Herod in the Roman times. But you can see the Dome of the Rock in the background there, and the Jewish people. This is the Jewish sector, of course, there at their city. It's interesting. This is the emblem of Hamas, and you can see there, this is sort of harkening back to this controversy. Central to their aspirations is the Temple Mount, where the Dome of the Rock is. And notice up above there, you can see there's the map of Israel. And that's been their chant in the universities around the world of just this week. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And that clearly means they expect the Jews to move on and that they will inherit the land. It's theirs, in their opinion. This is the elements of the controversy that goes way back to the house of Abraham himself. Now let's just pull out a little bit further in this chapter, still in Isaiah 34, the verse that starts the chapter. Look at this. This is pretty attention-grabbing. Let the earth hear and all that fills it, the world and all that comes from it, for the Lord is enraged against all nations and furious against all their host. He has devoted them to destruction and has given them over for slaughter. I mean, it's a pretty confronting introduction to this chapter that's tucked away in the prophets. But the context of this controversy of Zion, the trigger that brings about God's intervention, as you can see here, the context shows that he is quite emotive here. He's not just going to passively come and pull the conflict apart. He is enraged and he is furious. This is what we need to understand, that God has a part in this whole unfolding story that is happening in the Middle East. And as we can see, the Bible metaphor that's used of a woman in travail, we appreciate that figure of speech, that the day of God's intervention is like a woman in travail, that the birth pangs start very mildly to start with, and gradually they get more and more intense and more rapid. This is the term that's used in both Old and New Testament to describe the build-up and lead-up to this day of the Lord, when he, in fury, intervenes in man's affairs. So that brings us then to the current situation in Israel and the Palestinian conflict. This quite nicely captures the onslaught by the Palestinians, the Hamas particularly down in Gaza, and Israel harnessing technology to defeat this onslaught by the Palestinians. But since October the 7th, there has been a seismic shift in Middle Eastern politics. And we can see it's still working out. Just today, they're pushing hard to get the Palestinian state recognised in the United Nations. And we'll watch this space and see how it unfolds. But it's not just the local politics of the Middle East, but everyone is getting involved. And this is what we would expect, as we'll soon see in another prophecy we're about to go to. And this controversy has grown in intensity, particularly in the last 100 years or so, essentially since the Jews have started to migrate back to the Promised Land. A key outcome of the October 7 attack by Hamas in those southern settlements of the Jewish people is anti-Semitism. This is something that is just getting stronger and stronger, and anti-Semitism, it's sort of exponential, and it's really polarising world opinion. And it's really quite sad to watch, because the plight of the Jewish people is a consistent and a tragic phenomenon that has just rolled on throughout history. The persecution of the Jews and the ostracising of them in society is not a new phenomenon. We only have to look back within living memory of some of us here, we would remember the events of World War II. Who would have thought that that sort of ugly anti-Semitism could arise again, even in America, on the campuses of their universities? The roots of this prejudice are very complex, and I'm not going to try and sort them out, but they're based in religion and they're based in politics. And it's a bit of an irony that often it raises its head, usually when the Jews are successful, and often leads to their vilification, and they become the scapegoats, and society really avoids facing up to the real underlying bigger problems that's going on in government and in society, and they take it out on the Jews, just like the Germans did in World War II. And we can see this wave is rising again, and this is what we would expect from the prophets. The controversy of Zion is going to grow in intensity right up to the final intervention of God into man's affairs. So now I want to take what we've learned from Isaiah, and I want to now go into Joel chapter 3. Okay, this is an image from the Arch of Titus. It still exists today in Rome, and it's a high relief sculpture or carving that depicts the Jewish people and the sacking of Jerusalem. There's the menorah, which was the central piece, or one of the central pieces in their temple and their worship. And here are Jewish captives being taken to Rome. And the Romans absolutely decimated the Jewish state in AD 70, if you're not aware of that history. But essentially, they were sold as slaves around the world, and every remnant of the Jewish state was destroyed by the Romans. They were so, they had had enough of the Jewish people by the time of the sacking of Jerusalem. And Joel 3 talks about this. Here's the quote from the beginning of Joel 3. And we're picking up this idea now in the modern context of the controversy of Zion. Now, this prophecy is epic. Let me tell you, it is just amazing to just read it very carefully and pick up really what it's saying. Look at this. For, behold, in those days and in that time, when I bring again the exiles of Judah and Jerusalem, so This is telling it, this is a prophecy that's 2,500 years old, approximately. 2,500 years old, and it's been sitting in our Bibles, dormant, for all that time. And then all of a sudden, in the last century or so, things have started stirring and the Jewish people have come back. And notice, the exiles of Judah and Jerusalem come back. Now, this is a hallmark of Bible prophecy. It tells you in advance what you can expect to see. Behold, you keep your eyes open and watch. Look for it as the decades and the centuries of history roll on. Look for this event. The Jewish people are going to come back to the promised land. And notice the personal pronoun in this verse. In that time when I will bring again the exiles of Judah and Jerusalem. That's pretty remarkable. That actually adds another perspective on the debate that's currently going on in the campuses of the universities around the world, isn't it? This is a perspective that most people have probably not taken into account in their arguments and their protests. There's more going on here in the Jewish people being back in the land than meets the eye. That's what this prophecy tells us. And not only that, it tells us a specific sequence of events we can expect to see. I don't know what this does to you, but I find this remarkable. This prophecy is 2,500 years old, and look, it tells us the exiles of Judah are going to come back, and then the exiles of Jerusalem. What a remarkable prophecy, because that's exactly how it happened. And I've got these two iconic photos of these two periods, okay? God would bring again the captivity of Judah. So there is Ben Gurion in 1948, the 14th of May. We're almost up to an anniversary of him standing up reading the Declaration of Independence. And if you haven't read it, I recommend you have a look at it, because it's a remarkable thing as is the aspirations of the Jewish people as they come back to their promised land. And there's Theodor Herzl, the Zionist. The first Zionist Congress was convened by him in Basel of Switzerland. There it is. The Zionists are coming back to the land. And here it is, 19 years later. In fact, in that immediately after his Declaration of Independence, there was a war, and the Jewish people lost their toehold on Jerusalem, and they were kicked out. And not one Jew put their foot inside the ancient city of Jerusalem for 19 years. That had not happened. There were always a little pocket of Jews there throughout the Ottomans and so forth and the Crusades. But for 19 years, not one Jew put his foot inside Jerusalem. And then we have this miraculous war. 6 days. Can you believe it? 6 days. They managed to push back 3 advanced armies, and they took back control of Jerusalem. An amazing story. So, there's more going on here in the Jewish people being back in the promised land than meets the eye. And we should, if we're wise, take account of these uncanny things that are happening here, because the Bible has foretold this is what's going to happen, and the Bible tells us why they're happening, because God is making it happen. That's what we have in Joel chapter 3, verse 1. What an amazing insight that the Bible gives us into all the stuff and the chaos and the hubbub that's going on in the world. The Bible gives us a wonderful insight into the fact that God is actually in control. The Jewish people didn't end up in the land just by accident. It wasn't just a chance of history. It was a miracle. I mean, the 6-day war, the Jews even acknowledged that it was some of the things that happened there were miraculous. How on earth can an army conquer 3 armies and push back and take territory, their beloved city, in 6 days. That is just unheard of. We read on. This fits the context of Isaiah 34. Remember, we saw it was the controversy of Zion that is going to be the trigger, the catalyst that would bring about divine intervention. Look at this. Straight after that, the Jewish people have been brought back to the land. I will gather, this is the personal pronoun again. These nations are just not going to amble down into Jerusalem. God is going to gather them and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. Now, that's a reference to the area of Jerusalem. I won't go into that now. And I will enter into judgment. This is what Isaiah told us. This is what we can expect, the day of the Lord's vengeance. I will enter into judgment with them there, all the nations. That's what Isaiah 34 told us. Let everyone be clear on this, all the earth and everything that dwells in it. Make sure you're aware of what's going on. I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of, notice this, my people and my heritage, Israel. Gosh. I think we should be very careful in our criticism and our comments about those people. With all of their faults and blemishes and all of the mistakes they make, this is a perspective that we probably haven't thought too much about. I'm sure the students on the campuses of the Columbia University in New York have thought about it. I'm sure they haven't thought about it. And they're arguing and debating and protesting and smashing everything. This is a perspective that's well worth thinking about. My people and my heritage. Okay, this is the term that was used back in the family of Abraham. Because they have scattered them among the nations and have divided my land. This is where the current issue in Jerusalem is going. We're not there yet, but this is where it's heading. The Bible tells us. Okay, we saw verse 1, the sequence of events that was going to unfold. Should we expect that this is not going to happen? Can we just dismiss this and say, I'm not sure that's correct? In my opinion, I think, whatever. In fact, my opinion doesn't matter to Bob. This is what matters. This is what God is doing. This is a latter-day prophecy. It tells us that God is going to intervene and that the Jewish people are going to be at the centre of the controversy and all nations are going to be dragged into the issue. You read it for yourself. I don't need to explain it anymore. It goes on to say, and they have cast lots for my people and have given a boy for a harlot and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. So, we've seen this sort of behaviour already in October the 7th, 2023. This is a bit of a euphemism to describe the horrors of what happens in war. But we know what happens. And Hamas, when they did that in October the 7th, you would have heard this in the media, again and again and again. We will do this until we drive them out. That's what they said they would do. Now, that's not, obviously, that indoctrination and that attitude and that bigoted approach is not going to change. God has to intervene, as we can see. But look at this. And they've cast lots, so they're going to eventually, the Bible would lead us to understand, they will gain the upper hand and the Jewish people will suffer. This is an amazing prophecy. Look at this. Verse 4 to 8. Now, I haven't got all the verses up here, but we'll go through it. Yea, and what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon? That's the area of Lebanon. Now, is there an antagonist in Lebanon today that is adversarial to the Jewish state? Hezbollah. And all the coast of Palestine, the coastal region of Palestine, or the Philistines, that's Gaza. Is there an adversarial opponent there in Gaza? Hamas. And look at this. This makes you sort of shake in your shoes. Will you render me a recompense? That's the language of Isaiah 34. Remember, the year of recompenses. God's going to intervene and pay back, recompensate people for what they've done. Will you render me a recompense? And he's saying, what are you doing to the Jewish people? Are you trying to pay me back for what I have done by removing the Jewish people out of the land, my people and my heritage? I don't think I'd like to be in their shoes on this day. The people of Lebanon and the people of Gaza who are doing this to the Jewish people. This is what the Bible says. These are not my words. You read it for yourself. And if you recompense me, if you think you're trying to pay me back, and remember, Isaiah says, in fury, enraged, God intervenes. Okay, well, swiftly and speedily, the fury comes up in his face, swiftly and speedily, I will return your recompense upon your own head. And if you have a Bible, I suggest you can look on your phone or whatever. I haven't got them up on a slide. And by the way, there is Hezbollah over there on the left. You can see they're obviously have embraced conflict in their cause. You can see Hamas, that's their emblem. You can see their ambition is to take Jerusalem by the sword, and obviously the land of Palestine as they see it as theirs. And this down the bottom is the Houthis down in Yemen. Okay, and that's their emblem, and that's what it's translated. God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews. Victory to Islam. That is the mantra of the Houthis, because they're, interestingly enough, mentioned in this prophecy as well. So we've got Hezbollah, we've got Hamas, and we've got the Houthis down in Yemen. Okay, just reading on in verse 5. Because you have taken my silver and my gold and have carried into your temples my goodly and pleasant things. So laying their hands on the spoil is in fact God's possessions that they are taking hold of. The children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold to the Grecians that you might remove them far. Behold, I'll raise them out of the place whither you have sold them and will return your recompense upon your own head. And I will sell your daughters and your sons into the hands of the children of Judah, and they will sell them to the Sabaeans. And the Sabaeans, Shabia, is in fact Yemen. Isn't that amazing that this prophecy, these three players are there fighting together today? Never before in the history of this region have these three players all been active together. This is remarkable. Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Quite amazing. There it is, quickly there. This is what I find amazing about Bible prophecy when you read it carefully. All of these things are coming to pass, unfolding before our eyes. So in the final bit, we've got two more slides after this. We have Jerusalem as a city of hope. It's all not doom and gloom. We have this prophecy by Paul in Romans 11. There shall come out of Zion, so this is picking up, while all of this controversy and conflict is erupting, out of Zion will come the deliverer. That's a term that's used of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Saviour. Jerusalem is where he's going to appear. And he shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So that's one of his missions. But as we saw in Joel, another agenda item is to sort out the controversy between their neighbours. And I'm going to conclude with this quote because this day of judgment might be a little bit upsetting for some, but it's clearly a teaching of the Bible and we can't avoid it. This is picking up what we've learned in Isaiah 34, in Romans 11 and in Joel 3. God has appointed a day, he's appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness. He's going to do what's right. He's not just going to come in and destroy and overwhelm and ruin. He's going to judge fairly. This is what a wonderful outcome this is. And he's going to do it by that man whom he has ordained, whereof he's given assurance unto all men in that he hath raised him from the dead. And this is the hope of Jerusalem. Jesus is going to appear in Jerusalem and deliver Jacob, the people of Israel, and he's going to administer God's judgments, and God's assured us in that he has raised him from the dead.